Welcome to this Ray Talk on A Course in Miracles. The theme today, I'm really happy about this theme, why we need quietude. Why we need quietude. And what do I mean by quietude? Quietude is just that, being quiet. And periods in our life where we just disengage from all the activity and be with that quiet, be with that silence within. Usually what we discover when we sit quiet is that we're not very quiet, and we observe our thoughts and we observe our mind, and it's running a mile a minute, and we have all kinds of concerns and issues, things that we're thinking about a lot. And so when we sit down and disengage, that's the first thing we notice, is that our minds are going very fast, a lot of thoughts, a lot of concerns. So that's one issue. When we devote some time to being quiet, we have to stay with it, because our first experience of the quiet is that it's maybe a little uncomfortable. Like, we're such doers in this society. Everybody has their to-do list, right? ABC, 1, 2, 3. We've become a bullet list culture. And most of those things are do this, do this, do this. Well, quiet is the opposite of that. Quiet is there's nothing to do, and disengage from all you're doing. And you might say, well, what's the point of that? You know, because there's always things to do. That's true, there's always things to do. But how are we doing those things that we are to do? Are we at peace, or are we in a state of agitation? Are we in a state of concern and worry, anxiety? You know, there's a lot of factors to the doing. Do we feel pressured? Is there a buildup of our to-do list, and then we feel pressured? Things don't go the way we want, and then we feel even more pressured. So this quietude, I think, is a major focus that we need to give some attention to in life. How do we disengage from the drama of everyday life and then make some kind of a contact with this other energy, I would say. It's an energy. And that energy is within us, but we're so busy all the time, we don't make the contact within us to be quiet, to make that connection with the quiet. So it takes some practice. And I think all of you, maybe all of you, are on this Course in Miracles group that we're doing, and we've been giving daily attention to the lesson. And I suppose you've noticed, like when we first started, the practice was very kind of non-committal, you know, like, oh, think of this for a minute now and a minute this evening, and that's all you have to do. Well, now it's asking us to do four periods of 3 to 5 minutes where we sit and we recall the lesson and we apply it to the things around us. This lesson about holiness, my mind is part of God's, I am very holy, my holiness envelops everything I see, my holiness blesses the world. Those are the last 3 lessons we did. And this quiet starts to take shape. Like, what is the holiness? Well, the holiness is a state free of judgment, state free of problems. It's a state free of my projections, of my attack thoughts, my meaningless thoughts, my fears, my angers, my guilts. It's a state free of all that. Well, that's what I would call quietude. Quietude is that place in yourself that's your true nature, that's not affected by your opinions about others and about yourself. The Course says, I am as God created me. And a lot of people, we grew up in organized religions of some kind. We had a church or a synagogue or some kind of weekly connection to that. And then somehow it seemed we were disillusioned, we looked in other places, we left that whole system, and then we blundered into like A Course in Miracles, rebirthing, Eastern philosophies. But we still have this yearning to know something transcendental. And I think that always is in the human being, even if they declare themselves an atheist. I think there's this yearning in everyone to know something transcendental, to make that contact with who they are in truth, in the bigger picture. So traditionally, that's been what religions do, try to get you in contact with this transcendental atmosphere, transcendental identity. The Course in Miracles is trying to do that too, in a very major way. In fact, maybe no one has explained it so well, this dynamic of discovering our higher self or our true self better than the Course in Miracles, because it accurately describes our status quo of where we are now, with fear, with anger, with guilt, with this, it calls it the vengeful world, the meaningless world, all the things in our life that we're not happy with, all that stuff, right? So we all have some kind of stuff from our life that we've accumulated. And now the Course is trying to come in and it's not like you would forget all that completely, but you would certainly render it neutral. You would render it forgiven, it would say. You would render it without a charge on it, so that you can put that aside. Everybody has their personal history, their comedy of errors or their collection of their own personal hell events. So we put that aside and we make this other contact with this transcendental self. You could say, well, is that even there? Or is it just a pipe dream, this other higher self? Well, we have to explore it if we're interested. I think we're all yearning for some perfection in our life. And we're yearning to know who we are as God created us. This fundamental core of our being, we want to make the contact with that. And that's what we need the quietude for. It's in the quietude that we make those discoveries. It's in the times when we disengage from our routine. It's in the times where we've done our daily work, we've done our due diligence, we've done our chores, and now we have the space, we can just give that space to ourselves. And what do we do with that space? I mean, that space is probably the most sacred asset you have. Think about it. It's yours. You don't have to go to a synagogue or a temple or a church or a religion to find it. It's already in you. It's already your inheritance. It's already fully intact. just waiting for you to pay attention to it. So that's the key word, attention. You know, you could be interested in meditation, and then, you know, you Google it and you're going to find 100 ways to do it, and people telling you do this, do that, this system, that system. Well, what if true meditation didn't really have a system? And what if it was so simple you could do it right now? It doesn't require preparation. I think this is what the Course introduces us to. You know, people say the Course, oh, it's really complicated. It's just the opposite. It's so simple. We're not used to that kind of simplicity. So then our ego is going to make it complicated. There's this lesson I really love. It's lesson 125. It says, in quiet, I receive God's word today. In quiet, I receive God's word today. And then it just says, well, all you need to do is just sit and put aside everything else and just look within and listen. It just says listen. Only listen. It's like you're giving attention to yourself and you're just listening. And you're not judging what you hear. You're not saying, oh, well, I have to get this epiphany, or God has to tell me some really profound thing. None of that. You're just still and quiet and listening. And this is a practice. This is like you're going to dedicate some attention to this. And gradually, you are there, you're looking at your mind, you might even close your eyes, and you're looking at your thoughts. And then maybe the thought of the day comes to mind. Today it was, my holiness blesses the world, right? That was our lesson today, 37. My holiness blesses the world. And then it said, well, okay, you can say that to the things around you. You can also close your eyes and think of people. Like, okay, my holiness blesses David. My holiness blesses Judith. My holiness blesses Donna. And then you can think of people maybe across town. My holiness blesses my friends in the apartment downstairs. My holiness blesses the people in our government. You know, it's kind of like that. You give attention to something outside the routine. And that's the good thing about the lessons. They're always going to give you something outside your routine. It's like a pause. It's like a break with the momentum of doing, right? We're all in this momentum of doing. And not all of that is bad, you know? Like, we want to be productive with our life. We want to do something that's productive, helpful, serving, giving, you know? And in that production, that's our work and that's our livelihood, and that there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, like, we have to. Babaji said that's karma yoga. That's just as holy, work as worship, as anything else. So I'm not talking about that part. That part is very good. But when we get in the pressure and we get in the momentum and we have no space, that's when it gets a little bit off. So that's when we need these moments of quietude. We need to disengage. And it could only be like, all right, today it said 4 times, 5 minutes, 3 to 5 minutes. Think of this lesson. My holiness blesses a person. And especially apply it to anybody who's irritating. So I know you guys are all sick of us hearing about our neighbor who's noisy. Well, last night he was playing his music and they were having a party and it was 3 a.m. and we had to move to the other room. So, okay, so that's our challenge right now. But that's also the person I'm supposed to use this lesson. My holiness blesses the person next door. Can't even think of his name. Yeah. Julius. And you don't want to. You're irritated about the situation. So we're exploring that. How do we best handle that situation and not attack anybody and also stand up for ourselves? It talked about sacrifice in the lesson today. It said no sacrifices asked of anyone. And we were saying, well, yeah, he's probably going to see it like if we ask him to be quiet at 3 a.m., he's going to see that as hampering his lifestyle. And we don't want to have to make him feel like he has to sacrifice anything. But then we were saying, yes, but aren't we sacrificing our own peace of mind, our own ability to sleep in our own bedroom by not facing the issue and dealing with it? So that became part of the discussion. All right, so there may be an action that we have to take, a correction, an action. Our life is full of actions, full of them. That's what being a working person this day and age is. You're in the momentum of actions. But now this quietude is something else. It's not in the action. It's in the space before the action. So that's like a cleansing. So Sandra and I looked at this whole issue this morning when we did the podcast on this lesson, My Holiness Blesses the World. So you have to have some space for that, right? And you guys are all keeping up really well with the lessons. We're really inspired how much you're really going for it. Well, that is the point that I'm trying to make. Why we need the quietude. It's because that sort of spinning wheel of our everyday life is going a mile a minute, and in order to bring some sanity to that and keep it on track and keep it going in a balanced way, we need those moments where we're cleansing, we're asking, we're disengaging, we're seeing it, we're taking responsibility, processing our own thoughts. Oh, why did we attract this? Well, maybe we attracted this just so we would apply these lessons to this uncomfortable situation. But it's in this quietude that it becomes less of a problem and more just of a lesson. It's not a problem, it's just a lesson. It's not a detriment, it's an opportunity, right? So that's what you receive in the quietude. You have a different perspective and you calm down. Like generally our apartment is very peaceful. You know, we've made it so we've got an altar in every room and we use those altars. We pay attention to those altars and we do a lot of meditation during the day and in the evening. So our apartment's like a temple. It's like a sanctuary. And generally that space is very peaceful. So it's out of the ordinary that we'd have to deal with something like the neighbor next door. But here we are, having to deal with it. So I don't know if we could deal with it responsibly without the quietude. So when he's not making the noise, our apartment's like, you feel that space, you feel that peace. And even when he is making a noise, it's our responsibility to stay in that peace, which I think we do pretty well. It's not so much when it's 3 a.m. and we know we have to move to the other room and set up our cushions and, yeah. So that's not, we don't like that, but it is what it is. This lesson, in quiet I receive God's word today. It's very beautiful. It's a little bit jumping ahead of our group, but it's a lesson I always had in my mind, one of my favorite lessons. I think it's the first time it uses the word quiet. The Course is often telling us to be quiet. And then listen for God's communication. Well, God's communication is going to be in a couple of different forms. For one, it might not be English. It might not be words at all. It might just be a feeling, an energy enveloping your space. And that's very beautiful. I can remember going to hear Tara Singh give lectures, and after maybe 45 minutes to an hour, he would usually talk for an hour and a half, 2 hours. There would be this quiet in the room, and everyone seemed so unified, and you'd look out the window and everything had such beauty, and everything seemed so connected and so unified. And I think that's what the quiet does. It unifies everything. So we end the separation. And we feel this oneness. Not just like it's cool in New Agey groups to talk about oneness and Om and all that stuff. But who is having an actual experience of the oneness? You know, it's real for them. Like it's their truth. It's not just wishful thinking or an idea that we like or something we're striving for. No, it is there in us. We have this connection to the oneness. We have this connection to the quiet, okay? And then that quiet envelops everything. You could say quiet and holiness are very similar. They might even be the same thing. You know, the lesson was, my holiness envelops everything I see. That was yesterday. My holiness blesses the world. Tomorrow, thinking ahead, it says, my holiness, there's nothing my holiness cannot do. So this divine connection that it's talking about, that's ours, it belongs to us. We have to claim it. It's like a state of grace almost. But we have to claim it. We have to put ourselves in that space. It's like we have a responsibility. We have to do the work to put ourselves in that space. Or like, okay, when the guy's booming at 3 a.m., we have a responsibility to remember the lesson. My holiness blesses my neighbor. And yeah, maybe we have to move to the other room, but we're not mad about it. We're not reacting about it. It's just the status quo, the way it is right now, and we move to the other room and have a good night's sleep. And don't make it a problem. So something like that. It's like you connect with the holiness, you connect with the oneness, and yes, you may have to make some adjustments in your life, this way, that way, but you're still in that connection, that holiness, that quietude. It's like you carry the quietude with you. You look at religious art, not just Christian, but all kinds of art from around the world where they depict holy figures, enlightened beings, And usually there's this kind of a glow or a halo or this kind of an aura that the artist puts around this being. And then you think, wow, it's almost like the light is emanating out of them. There is a light, but there's also a light emanating from them. And then you think, well, is this just like the artist's rendition of a fantasy? Or is this a real thing? So I've had the privilege of meeting a couple of what I would consider enlightened beings in this lifetime. First I had my teacher Tara Singh, and then I knew people in India, some of Sandra's teachers. Muni Raj was one. I never met Babaji, but I heard about him. And there was a light around them. I don't know how to explain it. There was an atmosphere around them that when you entered into that proximity of them, you felt this stillness, you felt this quietude surrounding them. And when you were in their presence, your mind also would go to that place. It would also quiet down. And Tara Singh had taken me to southern India. There's this sage, Ramana Maharshi, and he took me to his ashram. Ramana Maharshi had left his body, like Babaji. But you could feel the quietude of his presence in this place where he had lived. And they had his room in his bed, and they had a picture of him on the bed. And this room was very, very quiet. You'd go in the room and you'd meditate, and all of a sudden your mind just goes blank, right? So there is a power in this quiet that's real, it's palpable, it's experiential. It's not just a projection of our wishful thinking or an idea. No, we actually feel it, we actually experience it. And this was true for me at certain times in my life when I met these beings. So they introduced me to quietude. And frankly, I wasn't even looking for it. I wasn't saying, well, I have to learn how to be quiet, I have to learn how to meditate, blah, blah, blah. I wasn't even really looking for it, other than I knew there was something in myself that was transcendental of my ego, my personality. I just had this inkling that that was there and I needed to give attention to it, and that these beings that I went to, like Tara Singh, and in India, Muni Raj, that they had that connection. And in fact, I felt that they did have it, because when I was in their presence, I would enter into this quietude myself. And where did it come from? It's like they lended me their divine connection, if you know what I mean. Like, okay, maybe we're just aspiring to our divine connection and we don't have that strong of an experience of it. But then you enter into someone who does have it, and they kind of lend you their connection, and then you go up. Like, you make that contact easier in their presence, to the point where it's so palpable, you feel it, and then you don't doubt it because it's in your experience, right? So I remember the first time that Sandra took us to meet Muni Raj. This was in India. And she said, well, everybody can ask him one question, right? So we would have a group meeting with him, and we'd all go in. There were maybe 20 of us, and we all had a question, and we could all ask Muni Raj one question. Well, so I'm listening to everyone's question, and then I'm noticing, well, I had this question. But by the time it got around to me, and I could ask the question, my mind was like erased, and I didn't even have a question. So how did that happen? And there was such deep peacefulness in this atmosphere of this meeting. I never forgot that. And it was like an experience that I carried with me for the rest of my days, you know. And I had similar experiences with Tara Singh, where I was brought to this, almost like he would call it, a moment outside of time. A moment outside of time, where you're not in the momentum of your personality or your daily concerns. You're just totally removed from that into this transcendental state. And it's very blissful, very joyful, very peaceful, very whole. You feel this sense of oneness, this sense of connection to everything, right? So I had enough of those experiences with Tara Singh and Muni Raj and Ramana Maharshi and so forth, that I didn't doubt that they were real, because I had experienced it. And then my life became, how do I get in that state myself, and how do I sustain that quietude in myself without they're always aiding us. I mean, all the spiritual masters are aiding us. But there's a point where we have to take responsibility, and we have to put ourselves in that state of mind of our own volition, of our own accord, you know. It's like we can't be dependent on them. We have to find it in ourselves. We have to nurture that connection of quietude in ourselves. So then it's ours. Anywhere we go, doesn't matter. Could be in Washington, D.C., in an apartment with a noisy neighbor. We can access that truth, that quietude, that wholeness, that oneness. And the purpose of the spiritual master is to get you on that track where you're nurturing that connection. And then at some point, the spiritual master will give you grace and make sure you have an experience of that, and it's undoubtable. Like you never would doubt that is real, that exists. And then because you've had that experience, you keep going. It's kind of like your lighthouse, you know. The spiritual master is like a lighthouse, and he gives you these rays that are guiding your life, and you have these experiences of them, and you don't doubt them, and they keep you going. Just the memory of those keeps you going. So I think this is maybe the 4th or 5th time I've gone through the lessons in the Course in Miracles. And they're always, every time I decide to do it again, it's like I never even read them before. There's some power that they give to me, and they transmit something. I'm in a different place, right? Tara Singh used to say it's like a spiral. We're all kind of ascending in a spiral. So yes, at this level, we're going to feel a certain connection. And then when we come around again to the same place, we're going to feel that same connection again, but it's going to be at a higher level because we're already ascending. So yes, it's coming around again, we're doing the lessons again, but we're not where we were before, and we can receive so much more than we received before. And I think that's what's happening with me. And what's different about it this time is I have 32 people paying attention to the same thing. So we're truly doing this as a collaborative venture, and it's very beautiful. You know, we're all doing the lessons together, and even though we don't, have daily like we don't have these meetings daily, but we have in our mind this kind of psychic connection with everyone, and that psychic connection seems to help us get it in a deeper way and be more on track with the practice, etc. So every time we do something like the course lessons, it's an ascension. We're going up the spiral. The lessons themselves are a spiral, but the fact that we're doing them again, and maybe we've done them before, that's also, a bigger ascension. So it's deeper levels of the quiet. I think about this line in the Course where it says, when you're at peace and everyone around you is in a state of peace, like in your presence, everyone around you is in that state of peace, then you know you're getting somewhere. So that's what these spiritual masters, they've achieved that. So they have brought themselves to the quiet, to the peace within. And then their connection is so strong and so constant. Like they don't deviate, They don't like go into the quiet and then leave it and get involved in a drama and then come back to the quiet and then get involved in another drama. No, they just never go into the drama at all. It's constant quiet, no matter what it is thrown at them. There was this little story that somebody told us about Muni Raj. He was a body worker, and he was working on Muni Raj's body. And there was a storm going on outside. And this storm had blown over this tree, and the tree fell and hit the roof of the building and like crashed through the roof. It wasn't in the room they were, but it was in the building. All right, so this tree comes crashing down, and this huge vibration and this huge sound. And he was working on Muni Raj this whole time, and he said Muni Raj did not flinch one iota. Anybody else like us, that crash would have happened and our body would have had a reaction or a knee-jerk reaction. And he said Muni Raj's body just remained perfectly still, perfectly calm in the middle of, right in the next room, this tree going through the roof, right? Well, what does that say? It says that he's not affected by the external. He has made the contact with the peace of God within himself, and he never leaves that. He never deviates. He never falls out of the grace. He never falls out of the quiet. He's always in the quiet. Always. Now, it's a good assignment for us to try that, to not be affected by the externals. And sometimes we'll flunk. And sometimes we'll get irritated, and sometimes we'll get angry. But we have beings like Muni Raj to guide us and to say, well, this is what's possible. I think we all want that, really. I think we all do want the peace of God. And call it what you want, peace of the divine force, or peace of life, or happiness in life, perfect happiness in life. You can give it any name you want it, but it's a transcendental state that first we have to make the contact with it. And usually we make the contact with it when we're studying something like the Course in Miracles, or we're meeting these other holy beings or spiritual beings. I remember from my childhood, I was brought up in a Methodist church. and it was a Protestant church. And my mother and my grandmother, they were very devout Methodists, and they made sure my sister and I went every Sunday. And I remember there was this, I didn't generally like going to the church service. I liked going to Sunday school because my teacher would have us memorize the Lord's Prayer, and then she'd give the boys a little Matchbox car. And I had this little case full of Matchbox cars as a result of me memorizing all these little scripture verses. So I liked that part. But then going and sitting in the sanctuary and listening to blah, blah, blah and all that, it just put me to sleep, right? Well, I remember somewhere in that childhood, there was this minister who came from England, and his name was Reverend Collinswood, and he would give his little sermon in the chapel, not in the main, sanctuary. But before Sunday school, there would be an early service, and he would give his presentation in this little chapel. And I remember asking Mom, can we go to the early service with Reverend Collinswood? Because he was so inspiring. There was something about him that was really alive, okay? And he was inspired, and he was happy, and he was transmitting, something of the Spirit through his stories or through his examples. And even as a kid, I really connected with that. And I knew there was something different about him than than our regular minister, who was this old guy, and he just blah, blah, blah in the sanctuary. And it didn't seem to have any relevance to me. But when I went to hear this other man, Reverend Collinswood, I was like on the edge of my seat. I was like, didn't fall asleep once, and everything he said just kind of like made sense to me. So, well, what is that? Why is that? What was I hearing that I didn't hear in the other? It's this divine connection that we have. When we really make it, okay, it affects everything we do. It could be accounting, it could be whatever our job is. We're in the flow of that connection, and we put that joy into whatever it is we're doing, and then that communicates to all the people around us, and they pick it up too. So it's like a sharing of this inner joy. It's this sharing of this inner connection. And that's very palpable. You can feel it. And it's also very something desirable. We want to be around that kind of energy. We want to be around those kind of people. And so, like Sandra and I would travel to India to see Muniraj every year. I mean, it was worth it just to go see Muniraj for 5 minutes and be in his presence. And it's not like guru worship in the sense that you're giving your power away. No, it's you want to put yourself in the presence of evolved people as long as you can stand it. Because it's what we call the principle of right association. It's like put yourself with somebody who's higher than you, and they will draw you up to their level. It's like if you want to play tennis and you want to be really good at it, you don't play with people that can't play the game. You play with people that are better than you so that you go up to their level, right? Same with anything. It applies to spiritual matters too. You want to put yourself with people who have mastered that inner connection to the quietude, to the place inside that's totally peaceful. And then they transmit that energy to you, and you receive it. And then it's just a little easier for you to take the next step and keep nurturing. It's like a little plant, you put the plant in the ground and you have to water it and nurture it and keep the weeds out, and before you know it, your plant gets bigger. It can stand on its own, and you don't doubt that you can make that connection on your own. But it's because you have this seed from that original source of of the quiet. So it's something we practice. And what better thing do we have to do? And this doesn't mean, quit your job. No, in fact, it means keep your job and transform it into something higher, something more holy, I want to say. It already is holy, but we're not aware of it. But our awareness of that thing we're doing with this quiet going along with it makes it into something very holy. Krishna said this great thing. He said, I have no duties to perform, but I'm engaged in action. I have no duties to perform. In other words, he's not caught in some drudgery of obligation where he has to do X, Y, and Z. So he's free. He doesn't have duties. But then he says, well, but I'm engaged in action. So what is action? Action as opposed to the drudgery of a duty. Well, action is something natural, something intrinsic, something that happens just because you are who you are. Like you put an apple seed in the ground and there's an action. The water comes, the little plant starts, then it grows, tree gets bigger, after a few years starts producing apples, right? That's an action. Well, human beings have something like that too. So what is the action of our life? What's the purpose of our life? We've been planted here on planet Earth. We have a function. I have a function God would have me fill. That's a lesson. 192, I think. I have a function God would have me fill. Well, what is it? What's your function on planet Earth while you're here? Think about it. It's this divine connection, gaining the certainty of it, growing into the perfection of it. And then that is an extension. Like when you have your divine connection and you're doing what you love to do, and it could be anything. It's serving. It's beautiful. It could be anything. You love to do it. But you're putting your whole being into it and this joy into it. And people get the difference, boy. They know when they go to you for accounting, they're getting a whole different overview of it and attention and care than if they go to TurboTax, It's something holy you bring to your actions of the day. And that's something, somewhere Jesus said, love your God with all your heart and all your might. That's like one of his commandments. He wasn't so much into thou shalt not, but he did give these commandments kind of, love your God with all your heart and all your might. And then love ye one another like that. That was about it, So what is that? Well, make this divine connection. Find this quiet place in yourself where all the problems of your day dissolve. It's a powerful place. It's like you can solve any problem in that quietude. It won't take too long. You'll get the directions. And then whatever that thing is that you're doing, or you have to do, or you want to do. It has the vibration of that peace behind it. It has the vibration of that holy function behind it. And that's because you took the time to make the connection with the quietude first. And then you're imbuing everything you do with that quiet, and it goes out, and people will appreciate it. You know, we had this breathe yesterday, and we're giving them a couple times a month, and they're easy. We like to do them. They're not a whole lot of money. People can, you know, come and not spend that much. And so we like to do these and make these things available. And then we're even giving a lot more free things nowadays. Like this whole Course in Miracles year I give to God, I'm not charging a penny for any of the people in that. And it's my joy. I really love doing it. It's not, I don't feel lack in any way. And in fact, it's the opposite. I feel I'm so abundant, I can give stuff away. So the point I'm trying to make is that we were giving this breathe, and there are some people, and I think there are a couple of prices. You could pay $20 or $30, whatever. But then I thought, well, there are a few of my friends, people we know, students, and they're struggling. Maybe they don't have the $20. So I just wrote them an email, and I just said, well, why don't you come to this and you don't have to pay anything, just come. And that felt so good to be able to just say, oh, you know, I know this person is struggling, and I know they would benefit by the breathe, so just invite 2 or 3 people that are in that category, right? So I did that, and they came, and it felt really good. And then, you know, the other people that can afford, they pay the tuition or the fee, and it's wonderful. Everybody got what they needed from it. But this flexibility, I think, is what I'm trying to get at. Well, where does that flexibility come from? It was like when I was about to put the breathe out, and it was almost time for the breathe, maybe like in the 24 hours before, I'm asking myself, well, is there anyone else who would benefit, who should be here? They haven't signed up. Let me reach out to them. And I did. And they came. And they got a lot out of it. Well, that action came from me being quiet enough to even ask myself, well, is there anyone else that could come to this? And that was from being in the quiet. So you get insights, you get actions added to your actions that are mercy, charity, extension, enriching yourself because you have something to give. You know, you go the extra mile, in other words. You go the extra mile, and then going that extra mile, you feel so good about the whole thing, like, wow, I've done my best job I could possibly do, and I made it available to all the people that needed to be there. And that applies to, you know, any work. You know, I used to be a contractor, and some of my contractor colleagues would say, never give the client anything extra. If they want anything extra, you always have to charge them and fill out a change order and blah, 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 and yeah, all that. Well, there would be times where I would just want to give extra stuff. I would like to do a little bit extra on the work to make it the quality even better, right? And it didn't really cost me anything other than my attention to it. And I wouldn't charge the client extra. I would just go the 9 yards, go the extra mile. And they would appreciate that. And so I got this reputation of someone who was like impeccable with their craft, and they liked working with me because I always gave them what they wanted, and they always loved what I did for them. And part of it was I would go the extra mile, and they would get something that they hadn't counted on. So I think we have to do that in our life. And it's this quietude, this connection with our divine source that is going to help us do that. And it's natural. You won't even have to think about it. It just comes to you. Yeah, I do this, I do that, and it's perfect. And you're in the flow. So, does anybody have anything to say about quietude? Open for questions. Yes, Kathy.
I'll just say, Marcus, you have this about you. I mean, you have this aura, and it's just to sit in your presence is wonderful. Even on Zoom, it's wonderful.
Oh, thank you.
I don't know if everybody else would agree with that, but that's how I feel when I'm with you. So thank you for that.
Well, thank you, Kathy, and we'll plan many more adventures. Yeah. When this COVID's over, we got all kinds of adventures we're going to plan with you.
Marcus?
Yes.
Judith, I just love you. That's why I keep coming back.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you, Judith. You know, I must have done a breakthrough. I must have made a breakthrough, and I don't even know when it happened. But I always felt a little bit like Tara Singh was my teacher, right? And then when I first got with Sandra, and she said, well, why don't you share the Course in Miracles? It was kind of like, well, yeah, but, you know, Tara Singh was my teacher. How can I do that he did? And then the more I put myself out there, I could see where he was kind of coming through me. It's still Marcus, you know. I have my own little style that's not at all like Tara Singh's, but there's some kind of a presence that he has that comes through me. And it's because Sandra would always say, well, if you're not going to share the Course, why did you spend 17 years studying with Tara Singh? And I didn't have an answer. It was like, well, yeah, why did I? You know? And then, okay, I have a responsibility to share this. And then I started sharing about the Course. But it's only in the last year, actually maybe the pandemic and the fact that we're doing more stuff online, that I really feel I've come into this connection with my own source. And I'm sure it's Tara Singh coming through me too, a certain degree of that, and Babaji and the Dream Team and all that. But it feels more like I have, you know, I can say I feel the love of God within me now, and it's my truth. Whereas before maybe I could say it, but I didn't feel it, right? So then I could say it now, and I feel it in you guys. That's how I feel the love of God within me, is my relationship with you. And then since I tried for years to get a Course in Miracles group together, and this way, that way. But this year, it just clicked. It was like, okay, I put it out one day, and I had 32 people the next day. And it was totally effortless. So there must be something ready in me for this role that I've accepted. And you guys are much a part of it. I wouldn't be here if you weren't here. And I wouldn't be saying these things if your energy weren't pulling it out of me, right? So it's a collaborative venture. It truly is. It's a collaborative venture. Even the Course says that. This is a collaborative venture. And
Marcus, I think also because of the pandemic, it forced all of us to go deep within ourselves and face this whole thing with the Zoom and not being around other people. So we've been forced into a sense of quietude.
Yes.
And some of us are in retirement age, which we don't have to deal with all that hoo-ha of our work days, you know?
Yeah. Well, it's beautiful, Judith. I'm enjoying it a lot. I'm busier than I ever have been, though. Like, I'm working harder now than I did when we were on the road, and I'm not even going anywhere. But it's a joyful thing. I love it. I love this connection. Yeah.
Oh, the world changed. That's it. The world changed.
Yeah.
All over the entire planet is dealing with this.
Yeah. So true. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, there, Donna. What's going on with you?
Oh, I just wanted to thank you. You've come into being the teacher.
Oh, okay.
And that's the goal of every teacher, right? To have their students be able to become teachers.
Yeah.
So you've absorbed what you were taught, and now you're teaching. I found your talk today to be very moving. I thought about a lot of things that I've experienced in my own life with Sai Baba.
Mm-hmm.
And even your talk about going to church. I love Sunday school, but didn't so much like those sermons in the Lutheran church.
Yeah. They put us to sleep, didn't they?
Taken similar paths. And it's lovely to be here. Very moving and very sweet. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, you know, it's interesting because Sandra and I watched this new movie out with Judi Dench last night called Belfast, right? And it was about the era in Northern Ireland when they were having all the strife and all the trouble. And this was focusing on this family in Belfast. And it was all through the eyes of this little boy. And he had a brother, and then his parents, and then his grandparents, and all the things they were going through in the middle of this whole strife in Belfast with, you know, riots and bombs and that sort of thing. Well, so the little guy, he was so present and so sweet. And then he had this, I swear, he went to church and he had this little box that his dad would bring him back, these Matchbox cars, right? And he had a case for the cars. And I remember having that case that I could keep my little cars in, right? And so this kid, it was around about the same era in the 60s, like mid 60s. And there's this little guy, and he's got his little box with his Matchbox cars. And I'm remembering, wow, that's such a vivid memory for me, because when I would go to Sunday school, and Mrs. Gaines, that was our teacher, she said, you kids, you have to memorize some of these things, but I'm going to make it easy for you. You know, and when you memorize the Lord's Prayer, all the boys get a Matchbox car. Well, so I got really good at memorizing, right? I'd get all these little cars. Then I had so many of them. Mom had to buy me this little case. And there's this kid in the movie, and he's got his little Matchbox case and his cars, and he's taking them out, and he's looking at them. It was like such a deja vu, right? Oh, it was amazing. So we have these memories where we really were connected to joy. And we really were connected to the Holy Spirit. And yeah, it didn't come in ways that you'd think. It didn't come in the sanctuary. It came in all the other auxiliary things that we were exposed to. Yeah. And I've got a standing joke with David. Somehow around that, they taught us in Sunday school a lot about the Jewish traditions. And they told us about dreidels, right? They're these little tops. And so I got my little set of dreidels in the drawer over there, and I told David, I noticed on the back it says you use this for gambling, and you spin it a certain way, and there are 4 letters, and if it falls this way, you get the whole pot, and if it falls this way, you get like half the pot. So it's like a way of gambling. And I said, well, next time we come to Omaha, I'm bringing the dreidels, and we're going to gamble. And this all came out of, like, I wouldn't have known about dreidels if I hadn't gone to Sunday school. So where do we get these things? I mean, God is kind of leading us in the directions that we need to go. And it's beautiful. Thank you.